I'm just starting the recording now. Okay, good. So everything is working fine now. I'm sorry for that, that you had to wait. Let's begin now. So as I said, it's going to be an introductory session today in which we are going to cover, we're going to talk about the structure of the course, what we will be doing in all the classes that we would have until your last exam, inshallah. Let's go through this quickly. Now, most of you have studied one course or the other with me before. There are a few new people as well. What I'll do is I'll quickly go through my introduction very quickly in a minute. So this is my educational background because a lot of people then later on ask about it. You can have a look at this. I did a master's from Real College, bachelor's from LUMS. Before that, these are the different schools that I teach at right now in Lahore: Trinity School, LGS, ISL, and then I'm starting at City Ravi in a few months, inshallah. This is what I'm doing, and that's my connection with maths. Maths is something that I've really loved since very early years, and I've been part of Pakistan national team for a couple of years as well for math Olympiads, if you might have heard of that. Okay, so that's a quick introduction about me, just to make sure that you understand you're hopefully in safe hands for the next month and a half, inshallah. Now, let's begin with the course. Some logistical things, first of all, there are different tools that you will need to use throughout the course. Number one is Zoom. We are going to have all our live classes on Zoom. You'll have the links shared in each group separately. So for now, for today, it's the same link for all the different groups, but from the next class, inshallah, all the different groups that we've got for P1, P3, M1, M1, and S1, you will all receive your individual links for the classes. That's the first thing. You will need to log in to be able to join classes. Sometimes you cannot do that on a browser. So make sure that you have Zoom downloaded on your devices. Please do not attend classes on your phone. Use a bigger screen that is going to help you stay more attentive and learn better. On phone, you'll have a lot of distractions. So download Zoom on your laptops, on your tablets that have bigger screens, and that is going to be more helpful. The next thing is OneNote and OneDrive. So everything that we will be doing in classes, all the papers that we will be solving, you'll have access to them in notes form as well, the solved papers. For that, you need to download these two apps on your phone. These are Microsoft apps available for free. You will need uh, an email account, download these apps, log in from the same email account on both the apps, and then the links that I'll be sharing in the groups, you can access the solved past papers using those links through these apps. Okay, this is the second tool that we'll be using. The app that I use for writing in classes, that's OneNote. You'll have access to those notes then. The recordings are going to be available as private playlists to the registered students. So in each group, I will be sharing links that will be accessible to you guys, in which you'll be able to access all the class recordings. So every class is going to be recorded. I know some of you have told me that you have clashes and everything. What I'll do is I'll be sharing the recordings of the classes the same night in most cases, inshallah. So 95% of the times, hopefully 99% of the times, you will have access to the recordings the same night. So in case you have a clash someday, you can access the recording the same night. Now, ideally, you should be attending classes live because otherwise you'll keep procrastinating and it'll keep getting delayed. But in case there's an emergency or there's a clash, only then you're allowed to skip a class, but then catch up with that the same night. Do not delay that. If you delay that, it'll become very difficult to go through that recording later on then. Okay. So recordings are going to be available as private playlists to you guys. And then WhatsApp group, of course, for communication. And I'll be posting some polls in the group as well while we are covering the course. So as I'll go through the structure of the course, you will see that for some papers we will be doing difficult questions only. So how would we decide those difficult questions? I'll be posting polls in the WhatsApp group based on which we will see which questions are most students finding difficult, and we will do those particular questions from those papers. Okay. Acha. So that's the logistics. These are the different tools that we will be using. Some important things before I go through the structure of the course then. Please make sure the papers that we do in every single class, you have attempted them yourself, first of all. I'll be telling you which papers we are going to be attempting before classes. So, in most likely, what I'll do is I'll give you a weekly schedule that these are the papers that we plan to do in the next week. You would be expected to have attempted those papers before classes. Okay. Otherwise, it's not going to be helpful. Otherwise, you're not going to find this course helpful. If you just come to classes and just see me doing everything, that's not going to help. Okay. You will not be able to do it in the exam then. What you have to do is you have to attempt the papers yourself, first of all. You have to attempt the papers yourself, first of all. And then identify which questions are having problems in, and then ask about those questions in classes then. That will be much more beneficial. Otherwise, if you just come to class without having done that effort yourself, when you look at the question and you look at me solving that, it might seem that it's pretty straightforward, but it will actually not be that straightforward, and you might have gotten stuck if you were doing that yourself. You will not realize that unless you attempt the papers yourself, first of all. Okay, so please make sure to do that. If you're relying on recordings, before you watch a recording, attempt the paper yourself, first of all. Otherwise, you will not learn much out of it. But then don't just count the number of papers that you've done. Do not just count the number of papers that you've done. What's important is that you're improving your performance for in every single paper that you're doing. A lot of people, they keep counting that, okay, I've done 10 papers of this component, I've done 30 papers of this component. It's quality over quantity. The number does not matter as much as the way you attempt those papers. Every single paper that you attempt, mark that using the marking scheme. Identify which topics it is that you're losing marks in. Identify the concepts that you are struggling with. Before you do the next paper, make sure to go through those concepts again, and then you need to make sure that in the next step, in the next paper that you do, you're not repeating those same mistakes. So the point of attempting these papers, the point of practicing these papers is that you improve your performance gradually. That will only happen when you learn from your mistakes. Okay. So revise the concepts that you're losing marks in, do some topical practice on those concepts, and then come back to the next yearly papers after that. I've talked about this before already. You have to be regular with the course. Do not leave things for later. Otherwise, your exams are just less than a month away now. You will not get time later. So the best way of doing this is that you attend live classes. And before the live classes, you make sure that you have attempted those papers. Classes are going to be very interactive. Make sure that you ask questions. If you have any problems at any point, make sure that you ask questions. Sometimes I will not be able to take the question immediately. That's okay. If I'm in the middle of a question, give me a couple of minutes and I'll get back to you. Okay. But you are going to be able to ask questions both verbally and in the chat. Okay. Yeah. So in the chat, some people will be talking about some random stuff as well. Ignore them. Or I would highly recommend those people as well to stay attentive and not talk about random stuff. Okay. Because otherwise you will end up distracting others. These are going to be bigger classes now. So I don't want random things going on in the chat, please. Okay, so we want to be more focused. Otherwise, you end up doing a lot of careless mistakes. You need to practice that while you're attempting papers at home as well, that you're not making careless mistakes. Okay. Achha, so ask questions, make sure that you do that. Any problem that you have, you can ask in the chat, you can raise your hand, ask verbally. And offline, apart from the classes, make sure that you're helping each other out in the WhatsApp groups as well. Any problem that you've got, post your questions in the WhatsApp group. But when you post questions, please make sure not just post the question and say, okay, I don't understand anything. That's not the way to ask questions. When you ask a question, you clearly say, okay, this is what you understand and this is what you don't understand. Or ideally, you share you're working with that. And then I can identify, okay, this is where you're going wrong. This is the direction you should be going in. Don't just randomly post 7 questions and say, okay, I don't understand anything. That's not the way to ask questions. You can sometimes that can happen in 1 or 2 questions, yes, but not every time. The better way to ask questions is you send your question along with your working that okay, this is what you're doing, and then what you should be doing after that, and I can identify the mistakes in that or point you in the right direction. And the point of having WhatsApp groups is that you'll be helping each other out as well. So when somebody shares a question that they do not understand, try to help them as well. That will improve your own concepts as well. So make the groups interactive as well. Help each other out. Okay. I'll allow you to send messages after the next class, inshallah. Okay. Yeah, of course you can do that as well, Ms. You can do that if you want. Acha. I will be sharing with you the past papers that we will be attempting. I'll share with you a folder that has all the papers from 2020 to 2025. I think the March one is also available somewhere now. I heard from a couple of people. I'll search for that on Reddit. If somebody has that already, share that with me because we will do the March 26 paper in about 10 to 12 days as well, inshallah. Okay. Walaikum assalam. I'll be sharing the papers in digital form. If you want to print them, you can get them printed yourself. But I can only share them with you in digital form. Okay. Ideally, you should get them printed. That should be very helpful, so that you do it exactly the way you're going to be doing it in the exam. So do it on the paper itself. That will be ideal. But if you can't do that, then the alternative would be that you have it in digital form and then work on your own notebook or something. But ideally, get the papers printed if you can do that. That will be more appropriate, more helpful. Okay, let's go through the course now. So you already know the course schedule. P1 and P3, these classes are going to be from 7 to 9, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. P1 and P3 classes, and M1 and S1 classes from 9:15 to 10:45. That's what the time is going to be roughly. Sometimes it can be 5 minutes more or less. Sometimes we can end up spending more time on a P1 or P3 because I might end up getting a lot of questions in the class that might delay the class a little. So we may have to start M1 and S1 slightly later, maybe around 9:25 sometimes. That can happen sometimes. However, On most days, this is the time that we will be following. Okay. Now, what does it mean P1, P3 together on that same time and M1, S1 together on that same time? What that means is those are the times that we're going to have for those papers. The days will vary. The days will vary like this. P1 is earlier, right? Your P1 and is earlier. That is, I think, 29th of April. So until 29th, we're going to have more P1 classes as compared to P3. So we'll have P1 on 3 days. You can see that on the left side. These are the days that we've got for P1. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. In most weeks, that's the schedule that we're going to have. These are the days that we're going to have for P1. And then we will continue with Tuesdays and Thursdays for P3 for during this. But then once we're done with paper one, then we would just have P3 in those slots. Okay, so these are the days that you have for each paper. These were there in the registration form as well. I'll share this with you again as well in the group, so you can have a look at that. So it's going to be, the classes are going to be every day for the first, every weekday from Monday to Friday for the first 4 weeks or so. But then your exams start after that. Okay, your exams start in this region. Here, what I've done is I have left a couple of days free for you, because then on those days, the next day you have some major paper like a physics P4 or a chemistry P4. So on those particular days, we would not have classes, and you have a major paper next day. But apart from that, we have classes Monday to Friday for one paper or the other. So in total, we're going to have 50 live sessions. 50 live sessions, 25 for each component. 25 for AS and A2. That makes it around 12 to 13 for each component for P1, P3, M1, and S1 respectively for each component. That's the number of classes that we would have roughly for each component. Now, what will we be doing in those classes, in those live classes? We are going to focus on papers from 2020 to March 2026. Now, that's a lot of papers. 2020 to March 2026. In every single year for each component, you have 7 papers. So you have 1 in March, you have 3 in June, and then you have 3 in November. That makes it 7 papers in a single year. Okay. In fact, in 2025 now, you have 4 variants in June and November. So that makes it 9 paper in 2025. So in total, for each component from 2020 to March 2026, you're going to have around 45 papers for each component. So that's around 180 papers in total. It's not possible to do all of them live, of course. Okay. And it's probably, if you're starting now, it's not very easy, or it's not very probable that you'll be able to attempt all of them at home even from 2020 to March 2026. So what we will be doing would be, we are going to do 16 to 18 of the most recent papers for each component live. So that will be all the papers from 2024 to 2025 and then March 26 most likely. And the rest of them, the previous years, you will have access to the recordings for them. Okay, you'll have access to the recordings of them by the weekend, inshallah, by around Sunday. I'll be posting all the links in the group. You will have access to all of those recordings there. Okay. Now, how are we going to cover these 16 to 18 most recent papers in 12 to 13 sessions that we would have? We're going to have 12 to 13 live classes for each component, as I said, right? In these classes, we will be solving 5 to 6 full papers, 5 to 6 complete papers. Now, how will I decide those complete papers? I don't have the thresholds file right now. I'll probably show that to you in a few minutes. So for each session, we will look at the thresholds of the papers, right? So for example, if we are talking about June 2025, In June 2025, for that session, whichever variant, which mean for paper one, we have P11, we have P12, we have P13, and P15. Out of those four variants, whichever paper is the most difficult, that has the lowest threshold, we will be doing that completely. Okay, we'll do that full paper. Let's suppose that was paper 1, 2. So we do that full paper. Then for the other variants, P11, 13, and P15, I will be posting a poll in the WhatsApp group and you will be letting me know which questions from those papers you find difficult. And then the most difficult questions from those three papers, we will discuss them in another class. So this way, we will be solving around 5 to 6 complete papers for each component and then 10 to 12 more papers for which we will be doing the more difficult questions. And on the same pattern, you will have recordings available for the previous years as well that you can go through. Okay. So that's the idea. That's the idea. This is the most important thing. It's quality over quantity. Don't just count the number of papers that you are attempting at home as well. Make sure that you are improving your score. So if you're aiming for an A star, that means for a P1, for instance, you need to get to that 70 out of 75. If you're aiming for an A, you need to get 65 out of 75 in paper one at least. Similarly, for the other papers, for M1 and S1, you want 45 plus for A star, 40 plus for A minimum. For P3, you want 65 plus for an A star, 60 plus, or you can say 57, 58 plus for an A. So target those scores, make sure that you reach those targets gradually. If you're just attempting papers, but your scores are not improving, that's not going to help. Whatever papers you attempt, your scores should be improving gradually. And that is what is eventually going to help you, inshallah. Okay. Now, the rest of it, we already talked about. You should be able to ask questions in classes. The recordings and notes are going to be available right afterwards. You can ask questions on WhatsApp as well, inshallah. And then, is there anything else that I want to talk about here? Uh, Not really. So we've talked about the rest of it. Okay, so that's how the course is structured. Now, before I move on, let me know if there are any questions until this point. Any questions until this point? Let me know. If your syllabus is not covered, that has to be your first priority. You can't start with yearly past papers without even knowing the concepts. So while we are doing these yearly past papers, the assumption is going to be that you know the concepts. So make sure that you cover the concepts as soon as possible. You need to start with that. In the yearly past papers that we're doing, then the first few papers that we do until you've covered those remaining concepts, you can skip those questions for now then, and then try to cover the syllabus as soon as possible. That's of course higher priority than just doing yearly past papers. Topical past papers and syllabus coverage, that is definitely more important because without that you cannot even do yearly past papers. But what you can do is you can attempt a couple of papers, identify the topics that you're losing marks in, as I said earlier, and then do practice for those papers, and then come back to more yearly past papers and do this iterative process. How many S1s we will do? As I said, around 16 to 18 in total, around 5 to 6 full papers, and around 10 to 12 more papers from which we will do difficult questions. Okay. Which papers will we do this week? I'll be posting that in the group, inshallah. I'll be posting that in the group tonight. Okay. So we will talk about if the syllabus is covered, but you have not done a lot of topical past papers. I've done 10 questions for each topic. Well, that depends. It varies from person to person. So if you had a very good grade in O levels, if you had an A star, for instance, I was telling this to somebody else who asked about this earlier today as well. If you had a very good grade in O levels, that means your basics are strong, and then you have covered the A level syllabus with some practice, but you know all the concepts. Then you can start with yearly past papers, and that's okay. But make sure that you are learning through them. Don't just again don't just keep doing the papers without improving. Identify the topics that you're struggling with. Make sure to go back and do topical practice, and then come back to yearlies again, and that should be fine. So it's not about the number of questions you have attempted. Even if you've done 10 questions from each topic, if your concepts are very strong and you had an A star in O levels, that might still work. But it really depends on how strong your concepts are. 7 to 11. So those of you are doing all papers, yes, 7 to 11 will be the timings roughly every day. Yes, 7 to 11. 7 to 9 for P1 and P3, and 9:15 to 10:45 for M1 and S1. I will be sharing the yearly past papers in digital form with you. I'll be sharing them with you in digital form. I'll be sharing a folder for that. You can get that printed ideally. That will be better. But if not, you can work on a notebook as well. But ideally, you should get them printed, or you can get one for MS Books or Student Resource, Red Spot, or any of them. Unsolved, unsolved yearlies, unsolved yearlies. I can also share the topical worksheets with you guys. What I'll do is I'll post them in the group, inshallah. Okay, topical worksheets for different papers. I will also share them, inshallah. Remind me about that in the group after I allow everyone to send messages. You can get access to them as well, inshallah. That's okay. But if you missed an A star by 1 mark, all I mean is that by A star is that your O level concepts are strong, right? So if you missed an A star by just 1 mark, that tells me that okay, your concepts are strong. So then your basics are strong. Then if you have covered the A level syllabus once very well with some practice, then you may still be able to start with yearly papers right now. You should be doing topical side by side, yes. You have to be doing topical side by side. Identify the topics that you're losing marks in, do topicals for them. That is extremely important. Otherwise, you will not improve. Otherwise, you will not improve. So you do have to do topical side by side as well in the topics that you're struggling with. Don't just practice all topics again. For example, partial fraction, for example, if you're not losing any marks in that, there's no point of doing topicals for that again. Only do topicals of those topics that you're losing marks in. Okay. Hannah, I'll share the topicals as I said. Please send a message in the group for that. If you had an A in AS and you want to maintain that in A2, how many marks would you need for that? In P3 and S1, depends on whether you had a high A or a low A. Depends on what your aggregate was. But for an A, roughly, in the Cambridge exam, you need to get somewhere around 57 to 58 in P3 on average, and 40 plus in M1 and S1. Okay. So at home, when you're practicing, you should be targeting around 63, 64 at least in paper 3, and around 43, 44 at least in S1, because then in the actual exam you'll have stress as well. And while you're doing practice at home, some of those questions may be familiar to you already. You may have seen those earlier already in some other practice, topical practice that you were doing earlier. So at home you should be targeting more than that. So for an A, how many questions for each topic? There's no fixed number. When I covered the syllabus in my crash courses, I recommend around 35 to 40 questions minimum for each topic. Okay. But it depends, it varies from person to person. Some people, they will need less practice than that, maybe 20, 25 questions, and they will be good with that. Other people, they might need more practice, maybe 55, 60 questions, and then their concept will become strong. What I recommend about this is you keep doing topical past paper practice until, so if you're aiming for an A or an A star specifically, if you're struggling with the topic, you keep practicing until you can get 5 to 6 questions correct in a row without making errors. When that happens for above average difficulty level questions, then you can be sure that, okay, now this topic is well prepared. Or you can say 95% of those 5 to 6 questions that you attempt. Now, for some people, that might happen after they have attempted 20 questions. For other people, that might happen after they have attempted 60 questions. So it varies from person to person. Okay, so there's no fixed number, there's no one magic number that will work for everyone. You keep practicing until you stop making mistakes. Okay. Rita will talk about that when they come closer. For now, make sure that you're spending most of the day studying. You still have around 4 weeks to go before your first paper. We'll talk about that later, inshallah. Acha. So we talked about this. Now, the recordings will be available to you like this, right? So I'll be sharing that playlist with you in which you'll have access to the recordings in this format. These are some old recordings, for example, for paper one. And similarly, you'll have access to them for the other papers as well. The ones that we do live, you'll have access to those papers as well that we do in a live class. You'll have access to other earlier papers as well that we are not covering live, but you'll still have access to the recordings for them from 2022, 2021, for instance, and 2020 as well. Okay. Uh, should I share with you the threshold file quickly? Yeah, I'll just show that to you, and then we start with the last part of today's class. And then we end inshallah. But I'll quickly show the threshold file with you. Let me share my other screen quickly. OneNote. Okay, you can see my other OneNote window now. So I'll be sharing this with you as well. So this is the threshold summary for the different papers. If you want to take snapshot right now as well, you can do that. These are the thresholds of these different papers from March 2020 up to November 25. Of course, we don't have the threshold for March 26 yet, but for the others, you have them available here. So those of you who are aiming for an A star, definitely attempt the papers that have some of the lowest thresholds in this list, right? So for example, you can see here, there's a P1 with a 49 threshold. See that here? 49 threshold. And then there's another P1 here, 50 threshold, 52 threshold, right? For P1s, these are pretty low thresholds. So make sure that you are attempting these papers. Similarly for P3, 45 threshold for an A in November 2025. Again, 52 threshold, June 2025, 48 in June 24. So low threshold means more difficult paper. So those of you are aiming for the top grades, make sure that you're attempting these papers. So the ones that I've highlighted them that for each session, I've highlighted the paper with the lowest threshold for each session. So these will be the papers that we would want to do completely, full papers from each session, the lowest threshold paper. So some in some sessions, two papers have equal thresholds. In that case, I've just chosen the variant two, but in the rest of them, it's the paper with the least threshold. Okay, so these are for P1 and P3. And then similarly, we've got these for M1 and S1. Okay, M1 and S1, you can identify the papers that have some of the lowest thresholds here. And if you're aiming for those top grades, make sure that you attempt questions from those papers at least. In addition to the other papers, of course, you see 30 for an A in November 2022. The rest are kind of okay. 33. This is one of the more difficult papers that you'll find in the past papers. 28 threshold for an A for an M1, November 2021. That's pretty low, right? Similarly, you've got it for S1 as well on the right side. You'll figure out when you look at that paper, there are a couple of questions which we now cover as standard variations, but that was the first time that some of those questions appeared, which students had not seen in earlier past papers. So that was a pretty difficult paper, 28. And in my opinion, it was not possible to complete that paper in time. It was so difficult. That's why the threshold was so low. Okay, so these are some of the thresholds. We'll be looking at this file to guide us about which papers we're going to be doing completely and which papers we are going to just do the difficult questions from. Okay, let me share my other screen now. Let me share my other screen. Okay, let's get back to this now. Okay, now before we start, some important things that you need to keep in mind, because otherwise they'll keep asking me during the paper. I would want to make this clear for everyone in the beginning. Level of accuracy, for example, that you need in different parts of a question and in the working and the answer and some other stuff. Let's talk about that. First of all, you already are familiar with this, how the papers are distributed. So P1, P3, they have 75 marks, P4 and P5, they have 50 marks, and the time for them. P1 has 10 to 12 questions, this has 9 to 11 questions, and then M1 and S1 have 6 to 8 questions. Okay, now that's the summary of this. Now that basically gives us around 1.5 minutes for each mark on average. So in all those papers, on average, we have 1.5 minutes per mark. So in M1 and S1, we've got 90 minutes. Sorry, 75 minutes and 50 marks. 75 minutes and 50 marks, that's 1 to 1.5 ratio. Here as well, we have 110 minutes and 75 marks. 75 into 1.5 is 105. So that's just 5 more minutes than that. So roughly speaking, you can say you have 1.5 minutes for each mark on average in the paper. Okay. Now that does not mean that you have to spend exactly that amount of time on each question, but on average, this is what you should keep in mind. For a 4-mark question, for example, you have 6 minutes on average. For a 10-mark question, you have 15 minutes on average. But smaller questions, they're going to be often relatively easier. So you can try to save time on them as well. So a 4-mark question, for example, you might be able to do that in 4 minutes. And then longer questions, they're going to be more difficult as well sometimes. In fact, most of the times, you might end up having to spend slightly more time on that. So you have to adjust accordingly. The questions that you find easier, you need to save time on them so that the more difficult questions, then you're able to spend a bit more time on them so that you're able to figure out whatever the difficulty is in that. M1 and P3, they tend to be pretty long. M1 and P3, you always have time management issues in these papers. Okay. So you need to make sure that you practice a lot. You practice these 2 papers a lot. The more practice you do, the better your speed is going to be. And that is going to help in the exam. Even if you know all the concepts, but you have not practiced enough, you will not be able to even complete the paper, because practice is what is going to develop that speed. That is going to help you manage time effectively and also reduce careless errors. Okay, if you have practiced doing questions quickly at home as well in the exam situation, then when you're trying to manage time, you will be able to do them quickly without making a lot of careless errors. Otherwise, when people try to do things quickly, they end up making more careless errors. So the way to reduce your careless mistakes is that you do a lot of practice. That will improve your speed. Practice easier topics as well. So, for example, in paper one, binomial expansion, APGP, coordinate geometry, these are easier topics. A lot of people, what they do is they think, okay, these are easier papers, we don't need to practice them. The easier topics also need practice. The reason for that is number one, you need to make sure that you get full marks in them. You cannot afford to lose any marks in them so that you have more room for error in the more difficult topics. Number two, when you practice them well, then you can save time on those questions. Otherwise, you will end up making careless mistakes on those questions as well. That will make you panic, and you'll end up making even more mistakes in the more difficult questions later on. So, practice all topics, including the easier topics. Okay, that's important. Now, while practicing at home, you should be timing yourself. You should be timing yourself. Now, for P1 and P3, you've got 1 hour 50 minutes in the exam. For M1 and S1, you have 1 hour 15 minutes in the exam. But that does not mean that that's the amount of time you should be giving yourself when practicing at home. You should be doing these papers quicker at home. So, roughly around 1 hour 30 minutes to 1 hour 35 minutes for paper 1 and paper 3. That is what your target needs to be at home. Okay? The problem is in the exam, you would have stress. Some people will end up panicking as well, unfortunately. When you have practiced this, even if you end up getting a bit slower in the exam because of stress or you get stuck at a question, this practice of completing the paper 10-15 minutes earlier is going to save you then. If you have practiced 1 hour 50 minutes at home with that time limit, in the exam, that's not going to work when you have stress and when you need to recheck your paper at the end as well. So when you're practicing, please make sure that you are following these time limits. Okay. So the other thing is when you're attempting papers, make sure to time yourself. Do not just attempt 5 questions in one sitting and then 6 questions in another sitting. That's not the way to do yearly past papers. When you're attempting yearly past papers, what you need to do is you need to do the complete paper in one single sitting. Do not break it. Okay. If it's a 1 hour 50 minutes paper, you spend that time in one go. You can't break it while practicing. Okay. So do that as well. Make sure to recheck your paper. Now, you will not be able to do this in the exam effectively if you have not practiced doing this at home as well. So when you're practicing at home, do not just rush to the marking scheme that, okay, as soon as you're done with the paper, you are curious, okay, how many questions you've gotten correct, and you look at the marking scheme right away. Do not do that. Rechecking is also an art. It's not that easy because when you make some mistakes, it's very hard to figure out those mistakes yourself. Another person looking at those mistakes is easier to figure out. But spotting your own errors, your own mistakes is not that straightforward. So you need to make sure that you practice this at home as well. Spend those complete 1 hour 50 minutes before you look at the marking scheme for P1 and P3. Spend those 1 hour 50 minutes, complete the paper, and this time leave 10 to 15 minutes for rechecking, and do that for every paper at home as well. And then look at the marking scheme after that. Okay? Do not complete the paper early and jump to the marking scheme. You need to practice this as well. That in most cases improves the score by 10-15%. That's like 7 to 10 marks in a P1 or P3, or 5 to 6, 5 to 7 marks in M1 or S1. You can improve them. We will be practicing some of that while we're doing the papers as well, how we can use the calculator to verify a lot of answers. We cover that in our classes as well. When we cover the syllabus, a lot of questions we can verify their answers from the calculator as well, or we can do some sanity check, at least looking at the questions, seeing if a particular answer is even possible or not. So we'll be doing all of that while we're practicing as well. But make sure to do this, that you recheck before looking at the marking scheme at home as well. Okay. Now, before you start a paper, make sure to skim through the whole paper. make sure to skim through the whole paper. You can spend around 2 minutes in this. The point of doing that is a lot of times you have some very easy questions at the end of the paper. You definitely do not want to end up losing out marks on them. So for paper three, for instance, you would often have a binomial and partial fractions question at the very end of the paper. Those are free 10 marks if you've practiced well, right? You cannot afford to end up not having enough time to complete that question at the end. So make sure to look at the whole paper so you know what is coming next. And then while you're doing the paper, make sure that you do not get stuck. Do not get stuck at any particular question. What that means is, if it's a 5 mark question and you spend like 4 or 5 minutes on that, thinking about it, and you can not really find a direction for that. In fact, not 4 or 5 minutes. If it's a 5 mark question, you spend like 2 minutes on that and you can't really figure out any direction. You don't have any idea what to do about that. Don't just keep thinking that, okay, I have to figure it out right now. This happens more to the better performing students who are aiming for an A or an A star because they have in their mind that, okay, I want an A, I want an A star, so I cannot afford to lose a single mark in the exam. Do not do that, because if you get stuck in the middle of the paper like this, you will end up missing out on some easy marks at the end. Even if you don't miss out on those questions entirely, what will happen would be, if you spend too much time in the middle of the paper on a particular question, you will have less time left for the rest of the questions. You'll start to rush a little bit in those remaining questions then and make more careless errors. So in the middle, if you don't understand something, you've spent a couple of minutes thinking about it, there's no direction in your head, move on. It's okay. Move on, do the rest of the paper, and then come back to that question at the end. And then you'll have a fresh perspective about that question at that time, and it might make it easier for you as well. Otherwise, when you keep thinking about a question for a long for a long duration, for a long stretch, for like 3 or 4 minutes, you keep thinking in one direction and you get stuck like that. Once you have completed the rest of the paper, your confidence will also have improved by that time. Hopefully, inshallah, if you are able to figure out most of the rest of the questions, then you can come back to that previous question and hopefully you'll be able to figure that out as well. So don't get stuck. This is the most important thing for time management. Most important thing for time management, you would have seen this in your school exams as well, that this is what ends up messing up most of the papers. So please don't do this. Okay. Usman, your question will be answered in just a couple of minutes. We're going to end in around 7, 8 minutes, inshallah. Yeah, just a couple of more things. Okay, this is a question that I'll keep getting. So please make sure that everyone understands it right now. Accuracy level required in all the papers is that your working needs to be at least correct to 4 significant figures. Working needs to be correct to at least 4 significant figures. In fact, let me actually show this instruction to you quickly. Yes, this is from a recent paper. So it says, give non-exact numerical answers correct to 3 significant figures or 1 decimal place for angles and degrees. This is a general instruction that you have in all papers. Okay, so unless a question specifies something else, that's an exception. In general, for all questions, your answers need to be correct to 3 significant figures. Except for angles and degrees, they need to be correct to 1 decimal place. So except for degrees, which is 1 decimal place, everything else in the final answer should be rounded off to 3 significant figures. Now that's for the final answer. For the final answer to be that accurate, your working needs to be more accurate than that. You cannot round off anything to 3 significant figures in your working. That will make you lose marks. if you round off too early. So in your working, ideally just use calculator values, but if you have to use decimals, if you want to use decimal values, use at least 4 significant figures. You can write more than that, but not less than this. Okay? And then final answer, that will be 3 significant figures. That's the general instruction. Unless a question specifies something else, in that case, you will follow what the question says. But that's the general rule that you've got to follow. For degrees, you've got 1 decimal place, okay? Achha. Now, in S1, those of you who take S1, remember, if you have to work with Z, that should be rounded off to 3 decimal places before you look at the table. And probability values, they should be rounded off to 4 decimal places in normal distribution. That's what I'm talking about. They should be rounded off to 4 decimal places before you look at the normal distribution table. So keep this in mind as well. That's an exception to the general rule. In normal distribution, Z values to 3 decimals, probability values to 4 decimals. If a question specifies an accuracy level, then it's mandatory to follow that, what the question says. So they can sometimes tell you that it's that you have to give your answer to 3 significant figures as well. Sometimes they give you some other instruction as well. For example, in iteration, they will give you a specific level of accuracy level for iterations and then another for the final answer. You need to make sure that you follow that. Even if one digit is off, even if one digit is incorrect, you lose marks. Okay, even if one digit is incorrect, you lose marks in that, so make sure to round off properly. Okay. Similarly, in these questions as well, there will be an exception. And in P3, when you have these types of questions, the R sine of theta plus alpha, they often tell you that you want alpha to be correct to 2 decimal places. In that case, you just follow the instructions in the question. If you don't follow that, you will lose marks. Okay. Yes, you will have access to this. Yes, you will have access to the recording. Yes. Acha, let's move on. Now, somebody just said in the chat as well, what about working? How much working do we need to show for a quadratic equation, for instance? In general, you need to make sure that you show all necessary working in a question. The method marks in the marking scheme, the M marks, you will only get them if you have shown the working. And if you do not get method marks, what happens is you do not get answer marks as well. Let me give you an example. Let's suppose we have a quadratic equation. You want to solve this quadratic equation, x squared plus 7x plus 12 equal to 0. Now, yes, you can find the answer to this from the calculator directly, and that's what I recommend as well, that you eventually use your calculator to get the final answer. However, it's mandatory to show at least this step in which you are factorizing that expression. This factorized form is necessary for you to write down. If you jump from this step to this step and you do not show this working, let's suppose solving this quadratic equation was 2 marks out of the whole question, you get 0 marks for that. You do not get marks for the answer as well. The answer mark is dependent on the method mark. If you do not show the method, you do not get the answer mark as well. Okay, so do not. It's a very common mistake in papers that people just write down the final answer directly. That's not allowed. You either show this step in the working, or just input values in the quadratic formula like this. Input values in the quadratic formula, and then write down the final answer after that. One of these two things you have to do. Okay. Either show the factorized form or use the quadratic formula. And for the others as well, make sure that you're showing complete working. For example, in S1 in permutations, combinations question, make sure that you're showing complete working and not writing down the final answer. In binomial and geometric distribution, for example, in S1 again, you have to, for example, if you're finding the probability of x less than equal to 2 in a binomial distribution, those of you who do S1, you need to show these individual terms. You cannot write down the answer directly. So those of you who have done binomial distribution will be familiar with this. It's necessary to show all of these terms. You cannot write down the answer. You'll not get marks for that if you do that. Okay, so if you're finding probability of x less than or equal to 2, you find the probability of x equals 0, 1, 2 separately and then add them up together. And you have to show every single step in this working. Okay, questions that involve proofs or they ask you to show something, you have to be even more careful with that. So I was just checking some exams in a couple of days back. Let's suppose you've got a function like this. Yeah, you have a function like this, f of x equal to 2x plus 3. And you had to show, it's a very simple example, but let's suppose they ask you to show that f of x is equal to, uh, or let's suppose f of 3 is equal to 7. That's a very straightforward example. F of 3 is not equal to 7. F of 3 is equal to f of 2 is equal to 7. You had to show this, let's suppose. Now, some people, they would do it like this. They would say, okay, this is the function. Put x equal to 2 and f of x, that turns out to be 7. That is not acceptable. Examiner wants you to input the value of x in this, 2 into 2 plus 3, and show that it evaluates to 7. This is going to be correct. This is going to be wrong. In show that questions or prove something questions, the examiner is very strict with marking. You skip a single step, you lose marks. So make sure if you have to input any values in a show that question, you clearly show that this is the value that you're inputting and then it evaluates to some other number. Similarly, when in integration, for example, you're inputting limits, showing that step in which you input limits, that is important. You cannot write down the answer without showing the examiner what limits you are inputting. Okay, so those steps are important. Otherwise, even if you do the question correctly, skipping an important step that will make you lose not just the method mark, but also the answer mark. You will also not get marks for the answer. Okay, so that's important. And when a question asks for exact answers, in that case as well, working is extremely important. You need to show more steps in that when they want exact answers. You need to show every single step in the working. Okay, that's important. Dashes and stars method in permutations and combinations, that is fine. By working in permutations combinations question, we mean you are writing the full thing 4 factorial into 3 factorial into 7p2 into whatever that is. Don't just jump to the final answers. Or similarly, for example, let's suppose there's a single question, there's a simple question. There are 5 objects, you want to arrange 5 objects. You would do 5 factorial equal to 120, right? If you just write 120 directly, you will not get marks for that. So that's the point, that you write 5 factorial first of all, and then you evaluate to 120. This would be your working 5 factorial. Now, all of those different methods that we have done, the boxes representation, the dashes and stars representation, the examiner does not care about that. That's for your own self. What's important is these factorials or permutations or combinations that you're writing. That is important. And in combinations questions, for example, when you have to make a number of cases, you have to show all of those cases. If you don't show all of those cases, that will also make you lose marks because they're part of the method. Does that answer your question, Rita? Yeah. Okay. Last thing. Some people have this habit that they would do the whole paper using a pencil, first of all, and then they would overwrite that with a pen and then they will try to erase the pencil. You will not be able to complete your paper if you do it like this. Please don't do it. Please don't do it. It will be very unlikely that you'll be able to complete at least P3 or M1 if you do something like this. That's one thing. Number two, you will end up making more careless errors as well. So when I look at papers, it's very common with those people who do it like this when they do something with pencil first of all, and then they overwrite on that with a pen. They end up reading some values wrong. They cannot understand their own right handwriting sometimes. Now I understand some people have really bad handwriting. Some of you are here as well. I'll not name them, but even if your handwriting is good, uh, and even if your handwriting is good, still when you write something with a pencil, when you overwrite on that, it ends up being a lot of clutter, and you will end up mixing up values and end up copying some wrong value. So please don't do that. And the more important thing is you will not even be able to complete the paper if you do that. Number two, for graphs and diagrams, you always use a pencil. Now, what graphs? In paper one and paper three, they will ask you to sketch graphs sometimes. In that case, you will use a pencil. In S1, for instance, when they ask you to make diagrams like box and whisker, histogram, cumulative frequency curve, stem and leaf diagram, all of those are diagrams. Make sure to use a pencil for them. Do not use pen for the diagrams. Do not use pen for the diagrams. Okay. Pen for the rest of the paper, pencil for the diagrams. All right. So that's what I wanted to advise you about in today's class. That's it for today. Tomorrow now, we are going to start with our first papers following this schedule. Where did that go? Yeah. So tomorrow we have P3 and S1. P3 at 8 p.m. inshallah, 7 p.m. inshallah, and S1 at 9:15 p.m. inshallah. Okay. And then on Friday we have P1 and M1 for this week. P1 at 7 p.m., M1 at 9:45 p.m. I'll be telling you which papers to attempt in about 30 minutes, inshallah, for the next two classes. And then over the weekend, I will tell you what to do for the rest, for the next whole week, so that you can have a head start and make sure that you attempt those papers before we discuss them in those classes. So in this week and the next week, we're going to focus on 2025 papers, inshallah. And then after the next week, hopefully we'll have March 2026 available as well. Those of you who have it, I will ask you to share that with me as well. We will do March 26 then, and then we'll go backwards after that from 2024, inshallah. Okay, that's it for today. I will see you again in the next class, inshallah, which is tomorrow uh, for P3 and S1, and the other two on Friday. I'll be here for a few minutes. If anyone has any questions, you can let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to see you tomorrow, inshallah. Allah Hafiz. If anyone has any questions, I'm here. Let me know. Otherwise, you're free to leave, and I'll see you in the next class, inshallah. Thank you. Bye. Bye. Yeah. Yes, notes will be available. Notes will be available. All of that will be set up in the group by this weekend, inshallah, most likely Sunday. So you'll have these notes available, for example, like this. So the previous papers, you'll have solutions for them, and also the papers that we do live, you'll have solutions for them like this, right? You'll have all of these solutions available. For some full papers, for others, the more difficult papers, more difficult questions from the papers, you'll have them available like this, okay? For graphs, I would recommend histogram is okay, stem and leaf is also okay digitally. For cumulative frequency curve, I would recommend that you practice that uh, on a piece of paper as well. Okay. For cumulative frequency curve, practice that on a paper as well. The rest of them, if you want to draw them digitally, that's also okay. So I was answering Vanya's question. She asked whether she can just practice drawing graphs uh, on a digital tablet. That's okay for the rest of them. For cumulative frequency curve, I would recommend that you do it on a paper as well. Okay. I will be posting in the group which papers to attempt for tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, inshallah. Okay, so there's a question: if the pencil and graph is scanned, then won't the working in the question will also be scanned? So you can leave it with a pencil. Yes, if you leave it in pencil and don't try to overwrite, it will be checked. However, they have this instruction on the paper, which it's a good idea to follow. They're saying use a black or a dark blue pen. They have this instruction on the paper, so ideally you should follow that, right? In fact, you should definitely follow that. And then for diagrams, they're saying you can use a pencil for that. But in case you end up doing something with a pencil, most likely, yes, that will be scanned and that will be checked, but you should not be taking any risks, right? There's no point of that. Notes will be shared by the weekend. I'll have to set up a number of things. They will be shared in the group by the weekend, inshallah. Okay. Those of you who have just registered and I shared the link with them separately. You'll be added to the group, inshallah, overnight. Okay. The groups were made already, so since you guys joined a bit late, you'll be added to the group by tonight, inshallah. Okay. ठीक है. Is that it? Is there any other question? Yes, Abdullah. Uh, yes, क्या है?
सर
वालेकुम अस्सलाम जी अब्दुल्ला.
सर मैंने आपको बताना था कि आई गॉट इनटू माय ड्रीम यूनिवर्सिटी अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह यूसी बर्कली.
MashaAllah, Abdullah. Are you serious about it?
यस सर अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह.
माशाल्लाह माशाल्लाह बहुत हमारे को.
तो
That's
मैंने
great
सर
to
बस
hear.
आपको कहना था कि मेरा किसी तरह सी ले आए मैथ्स में प्लीज सी चाहिए मुझे.
Are you back in Pakistan?
यस आई एम बैक इन पाकिस्तान इट्स बीन अ मंथ.
Okay, all right. चलें, let's work hard.
इंशाल्लाह
I
सर.
really pleasantly surprised. That's good to know, mashallah.
सर
बहुत हमारे को.
द वन एंड ओनली एडमिशन फ्रॉम आईएसएल.
माशाल्लाह बहुत हमारे को. That's
मुबारक.
great to hear. आप लोकल फी होगी आपकी?
नहीं सर आई हैव अ ग्रीन कार्ड नॉट a citizenship yet तो फिलहाल नहीं
Okay.
but I'll apply for reclassification but I got a scholarship of $40,000 per annum.
Okay.
Yes.
And you still have to pay around the same amount?
So I got a scholarship of 40,000 और मैं रहता भी बर्कली में हूँ तो residence नहीं है and the tuition is like 46 तो it's not much now. अब थोड़ा ही
Okay.
रह गया.
Right. चलें, inshallah. You'll be able to manage that.
इंशाल्लाह सर.
बहुत हमारे को. See you inshallah
सी
sometime.
यू सर जी बस मैंने बताना था आपको.
चलें, बहुत अच्छा लगा सुन के. ख्याल रखें अपना.
अल्लाह
अल्लाह
हाफिज़.
हाफ़िज़. अल्लाह हाफ़िज़. एक मिनट बस. So let me look at these other chats as well quickly. No, they're not going to be uploaded publicly. They will be just available as private videos. They'll be available as private videos. If you want to register, you can register using the link in the description. I'm posting that here again as well. They will not be publicly available. It's a paid session. It's not a free session. AdMath's past paper session, and sir, I'll be starting that. I'll be starting that In a couple of weeks, inshallah. In a couple of weeks. Second week of April, inshallah. ठीक है. Sure. Mhm. You will be told which papers to attempt beforehand, and then you can attempt those papers before class, and then we will discuss them, inshallah. So you will be expected to attempt the paper yourself, first of all, and after that, we will discuss that in class, inshallah. Okay? It's not really a disadvantage, but I would recommend so doing papers on iPad as compared to on paper. You do need to attempt a few papers before the exam on paper, as in on an actual paper. That will be helpful. But before that, you can use your iPad as well. That's perfectly okay. But you do need to get used to working on a piece of paper as well. Just before the exam, you can try maybe 2, 3 papers on an actual, you know, physical paper. Sure. These are Zoom sessions. They're not available on. They're not going to be available on YouTube, unfortunately. Trigonometry में जो exact values का table होता है, you have your calculator, right? You have your calculator. You can do everything on a calculator. It's not necessary to memorize them. In our time, we needed to memorize them because calculators could not do that. Uh, in our time, right? We are older. But now, the calculator that I generally recommend, the ClassWiz calculator FX991EX, that gives you exact values, and it has a lot of other useful functions as well. You can just get those values from the calculator directly. ठीक है, that's it. I'll see you again in the next class, inshallah. Tomorrow we're starting our first papers. Allah Hafiz.